Number 10, a healthy diet. What makes a deadly space goop even more terrifying? Well, let's start with its choice of meal. Us. He likes to eat us and our brains. In The Amazing Spider-Man issue 333, Venom said to Spider-Man, "We want to eat your brain." Now, him just saying that to you must be intimidating enough, let alone actually doing it, which we see in Venom the Hunger issue 1. He even surprises himself too when it goes from just being a threat to an actual thing that happens. The symbiote needs to feast on brains, not just because it's yummy and fun, but because of a certain chemical found in the brain instead. Eddie isn't a big fan of this throughout the comics and often prevents it from happening by giving Venom chocolate instead. In my opinion, that's a really good solution. Offer anybody chocolate instead of anything, they'll probably take it. Because chocolate contained the same chemical, so it worked. It was a nice tasty substitute. Until eventually writers just stopped including the need for human brains for a meal altogether, which is great. Let's just do more of that, less eating brains. And before we head over to number 9, if you guys could go ahead and give us a thumbs up down below, that would be great. You guys are the best. Thank you so much for watching. Now back to our list. Number 9, pushed Peter Parker. Now, when I say he pushed Peter Parker, you might be thinking, okay, well, so what? This guy does backflips off the Empire State Building for fun. So what's a push really gonna do to this guy? Well, this was an issue because Peter Parker's spider sense didn't go off, which he found troubling. It should have went off. It's danger. Why didn't they tell him? Now, do keep in mind, this is before Venom made his big comic book debut in Amazing Spider-Man 300, so his ability to block his spider sense was still a mystery. So Peter luckily saved himself with his reflexes and good Samaritans to help him out off the tracks, but Venom was trying to get rid of Peter long before he was slurping up bad guy brains. Now, the fact that he didn't say anything catchy or announce his big plan, any villain monologue, makes it more realistic and pretty scary. Number 8, Mary Jane trauma. Back in his first comic book appearance in 1988, one of the first things Venom did was introduce himself to Mary Jane in the next issue. In this moment, she can't even remember her name. She knows almost nothing because her mind has been harshly numbed while she's cruelly drowned in this onrushing tide of primal fear. That's what the comic says. That's how they described it. And these emotions may never fully fade away. And it's all thanks to Venom. She's so beyond scared that when Peter walks in with the black suit on, she thinks that it's Venom for a brief second. Venom even says that although it wasn't their target, shaking her up could still work. Yeah, for sure. Let's just terrify some people and ruin their lives just because. Awesome. Therapy not included.
Number 7, transformed Carly Cooper. And not in a good way. While under the mantle of Goblin King, Norman sought information from Carly on the true identity of Superior Spider-Man. He had her kidnapped, and when she refused to give up the information, she refused. He decided to recruit her into his Goblin army. Exposing her to the Goblin formula, he turned Carly into one of his own deranged minions, and for a time she served him under the mantle of Monster. She would eventually be returned to her former self, but this experience would leave its mark, changing Carly forever. Immediately after her recovery, she also cut Peter Parker and Spider-Man out of her life and moved from New York to New Orleans. Though she would come back. She would get over it, but it was still pretty terrible.
Number 6, leave a trail. When Eddie Brock was doing time at Rikers Island, his cellmate just happened to be Cletus Cassidy, who was in there for, let's just say, some horrible things. So when Venom came and reunited there with Eddie, part of the symbiote was left behind as they were breaking out, taking over Cletus Cassidy. This guy was horrible beforehand. I mean, he was in there because he took out tons of guys and he bragged about it the entire time. He's sick. So that plus the symbiote equals Carnage, making its first debut in Amazing Spider-Man 361, Carnage Part 1. He's one of the biggest, baddest villains in the comic, and I'm actually looking forward to seeing Woody Harrelson play him in the live-action Venom sequel. Now, while most of this can be pinned on Cletus being the main problem here, we have to add it to the list. Always make sure you don't leave any space goop behind, especially not in prison. Come on, Venom. Who do you think's gonna grab it?
Number 5, became a werewolf. This version of Spidey appears in Marvel Zombies Army of Darkness Volume 1. He doesn't really have a large role or anything, but being transformed into a werewolf has gotta be a new low for Spidey. In the comic, we see him with big old wolf ears and big hairy arms ripping out of his costume, and it is not lit. Can you imagine werewolf Spider-Man swinging through the moonlit sky chasing you down to eat you? Yikes. The werewolf web-slinger and his fellow superhero werewolves ravage the world and eat Galactus, later chasing after Ashley Williams when he appears in this universe.
Number 4. Killed Uncle Ben. On Earth 2301, better known as Marvel's Mangaverse, we see Ben Parker part of the Spider Clan. He's skilled and ambitious, and he even plans to open his own martial arts school. How badass is that? So during this time, he was teaching a young Peter Parker the ways of the Spider Clan. When one day Peter was rushing to avoid being late to the dojo, he was surprised to see all the lights were off. Weird. I wonder if there's like a surprise party or something, or maybe Venom's here. Let's hope it's the first one. With his last words being, "With great power comes great responsibility," he died at the hands of Venom. There's a nice scene later on where the two talk again, and Uncle Ben gives the advice needed to Peter in this dreamlike sequence. It's beautiful, but the damage Venom did on this Earth was permanent. And sad too, quite sad.
Number 3, Director of Hammer. During Dark Reign, we see Norman Osborn basically become the head of what ends up being the S.H.I.E.L.D. replacement. Due to the fact that he eliminated the Skrull Queen, he gets to take over and creates his own agency called Hammer, an acronym that doesn't initially stand for, well, anything actually. It was just picked because Osborn thought it was cool. As the director of Hammer, Osborn also took it upon himself to put together his own Avenger team, with him as the leader, Iron Patriot. Being a villain himself, you can guess what kind of people he called on to assemble his Avengers team. More villains, and some really confused and tormented heroes like Sentry. This was a really dark time in Marvel's history as Norman Osborn used all this power to do all sorts of awful stuff, all under the guise or in the often false name of heroic reasoning.
Number 2, Anne Weying. Anne first met Eddie Brock at Empire State University. She made her comic book debut back in Amazing Spider-Man issue 375. She reflects on how once upon a time her and Eddie were in love. That's right, he was smart, witty, with a boyish charm that swept her off her feet. So what happened? Well, while they were married, Eddie became a journalist for the Daily Globe, and she was a lawyer. So far sounds great. Sounds like a lovely household with people doing great work. After she divorced him, things only got worse for her. Like for example, I don't know, she was shot by the villain Sin Eater. Yeah. And then after that, Eddie figured it's a good idea to loan her some of the symbiote to heal her up. Now it worked, but the only downside is now we have a she-Venom for a bit. She ended up ending the lives of 2 men who attacked her, so once the symbiote was returned to Eddie, she had to live with all of those memories. Unlike Lee, who had time to kind of erase and forget and just trick his mind into believing he didn't do these horrible things, Anne had this for like a hot minute and then it went away while she was an adult. She's like, I know what happened. And it doesn't work out well for her. She was traumatized until the end of her life. She couldn't even leave her own apartment. Even for such a short amount of time, Venom can cause quite stress levels. Number 1, planetary attack. In Venom Space Knight issue 8, the symbiote teaches Flash Thompson a lesson about its past. Back to where it all began. Back to where the first host was born. Yeah, so after the two had bonded, he went back to his homeworld and took out everybody. Now all that remains are just graves of the dead. Venom describes this first host as a cruel and twisted soul, one who showed Venom the cruelty and twistedness of his own soul. He killed everybody on this planet, so naturally I have to put him at number 1.
Number 10, got dragged off to fight in another dimension. This version of Peter Parker has it pretty rough. When he was a boy, his parents died in a car crash, and his Uncle Ben was highly abusive. In his anger, he adopts the name Charlie Parker instead of Peter. He's a problem child, and he spends 2 years in a juvenile detention center. By age 13, he's living on his own and using his abilities to steal from drug dealers. If that's not bad enough, he's later recruited into the Superior Spider Army, picked up by Ashley Barton, and dragged off to fight in an alternate universe where the Earth is irradiated, without so much as an introduction or an explanation. That it's like, let's go, no time to explain. This version of Spidey is pretty grumpy, and it's easy to see why. Regular Pete already has a hard time, but this guy got dealt a seriously crappy hand. Still, having spider powers does seem pretty awesome. Number 9. Stopped a train with his body. In the second Spider-Man film starring Tobey Maguire, Spidey goes through some burnout after losing MJ to John Jameson and having his friendship with Harry Osborn fall apart. During this time, he's lost his spider powers and he gets attacked by Doc Ock. After an intense battle, the Mad Doc leaves Spidey to rescue a rogue train heading off of the rails. Pete, having already taken off his mask, puts himself directly in the line of danger and is stretched to the point of nearly breaking in two as he gives everything he's got to stop the train. The effort leaves him battered, bruised, and barely conscious, and in a touching moment, the citizens of New York move him to safety and return his mask, swearing that they won't tell a soul. It's a touching tribute to Spider-Man's sacrifice, and it definitely looks pretty painful. Hey Nerd Squad, if you like these videos and you want to see more, take a second to hit that like button and ring that notification bell. We really appreciate it. Number 8. Got beaten to near death by the Phoenix Four. The Avengers vs. X-Men event was epic and mind-blowing, featuring some crazy showdowns between our favorite heroes. In A vs. X Volume 1 Part 7, Spider-Man plays a big role as he trains with Hope Summers, trying to help her learn how to control the Phoenix Force. As she grows frustrated that the fight is escalating and she hasn't been able to help, Spidey tries to reassure her that her time will come. Ironically, it's Spider-Man's time that comes later, as he covers the escape of his fellow Avengers by distracting those who are controlled by the Phoenix Force. Despite him having no chance, Spidey gets up again and again after he's beaten to a pulp, likely suffering multiple broken bones while rescuing his friends. It's a real display of heroic sacrifice from everyone's favorite wall crawler.
Number 7. Broke Black Cat's nose and heart. Venom wanted everything to do with Spider-Man. He wanted to take away everything, starting of course with his love life. So in Amazing Spider-Man 3:16, he goes after another close acquaintance. This time it's Black Cat. We see her in a train of thought, wondering where Spider-Man had moved to. How peculiar indeed, I wonder. So she's come to realize that her and the Spider should be together, and then now Venom comes in just to ruin her entire day. Venom attacks and figures she must know where he is, although she legitimately doesn't. So before Venom heads out, he casually mentions that Parker's wife didn't know where he was either. Adding insult to injury, literally. She got a broken nose, and then he's like, hey, by the way, he's married, so your night just went from good to the opposite. What a terrible night too. Imagine getting your nose broken and then someone's like, hey, by the way, she's married.
Number 6. Turned into a lizard beast and then died. In this universe, it was Gwen Stacy who was bitten and received spider powers, and the experience had a profound impact on Peter Parker. Pete idolized Spider-Woman and was desperate to be like her. So desperate in fact that he experimented on himself in a scene that goes horribly wrong, and he's transformed into a terrible lizard-like creature. He shows up in this form at the Midtown Senior Prom, where he does battle against Gwen. After a serious beatdown, Peter returns to his human form, but he still dies from his injuries. Being dead has probably got to be one of the worst things that's happened to Peter, but it's not as bad as all the suffering that some other versions of Spider-Man go through.
Number 5. Tried to make Spider-Man his heir. If you can't beat him, make them join you. That was Norman's thinking in the Revenge of the Green Goblin story anyways. Here, Norman attempts to brainwash Peter Parker into giving in to his dark side and joining the Green Goblin legacy. I guess I should say his green side. Of course, Norman didn't succeed in the end, but for a moment there, it almost seemed like he might. He also put Peter through hell during this whole endeavor, so regardless of whether or not his plan was successful, it was still pretty awful for Peter the whole time.
Number 4. Killed by Thanos. Is there anything worse than ceasing to exist? When Thanos performed his legendary snap with the Infinity Gauntlet, literally half the universe was wiped away, but I was too busy worrying about Spidey to even comprehend the destruction. Seeing Spider-Man disappear like dust on the big screen was seriously heart-wrenching for a lot of people, but it also spawned a generation of hilarious memes, perfectly balanced as all things should be. Luckily for us, these events are undone eventually, but man, there's nothing like seeing Spider-Man die to sober you up.
Number 3. Lee Price. When Venom bonds to a host, depending on who that person is, things could be manageable. Like Eddie Brock, for example, things are manageable, it's kind of workable. But sometimes they can be even worse than before. Like in the case of Lee Price. Lee had a pretty rough time growing up. He was bullied, and his father wasn't the best role model by any way, and he treated his mother in an awful way as well. Just not a great guy, not a great house. So in order to escape this horrid living situation, Lee thought it best to burn down the apartment, all while his parents were still in there. Like I said, not a nice guy. And to get away with it, he blamed it all on a mutant with pyrokinesis, who at the time was his friend. So Lee suppressed this for years, and he grew up actually believing that the boy had actually done this. And he also thought that his dad had abandoned him the whole time. That's how far his brain has gone believing this. Later in life, he spent 5 years as a ward of the state before joining the army, until an explosion resulted in the loss of a couple squad members and a couple of fingers. Already a tough life, now enter Venom. You know it's bad when even Venom is trying to unbond with you. That's how you know. Lee used the symbiote for awful things, so much so that Venom was actually relieved once Lee had left the picture.
Number 2. been the last person alive on Earth. This version of Spider-Man is actually Ben Parker, in an alternate reality where he received spider powers when he accompanied his nephew Peter to a science demonstration and was bitten by a radioactive spider. Ben decided to use his powers to help others, but retired after his nemesis, the Emerald Elf, discovered his identity and killed his wife and Peter. Later on in life, Ben is approached by Ezekiel Sims, who warns him of the imminent arrival of Morlun, devourer of totems, on a mission to destroy all spider-folk. Ezekiel allows Ben to hide in his bunker under Sims' tower, and while he's there, the whole city of New York and presumably the world is subjected to nuclear destruction. He only emerges from the bunker later when the other spider totems arrive in the universe to enlist his help. He is reminded by the OG Spider-Man of his own advice about great responsibility, and he suits up one last time to help the Spider Army. It must have been really lonely just sitting around in that bunker though. Damn. And here we are at number 1. Turned into a zombie and ate Mary Jane and Aunt May. This one is just seriously messed up. So in this story, a zombie virus is infecting heroes like Luke Cage and Hawkeye, and eventually Spider-Man as well. After being bitten by Colonel America, Spidey takes a punch that dislocates his jaw, and then in this fight realizes the level of destruction happening all across the city. He realizes in the moment he's gonna have to go save Mary Jane and Aunt May, so he just bails, swings off to go and save them ASAP. Unfortunately, he does show up a little too late, and the zombie virus is already working its way through his body. When MJ approaches, he lashes out and bites her, and as she turns into a zombie, Pete sets to work on Aunt May. Ultimately, we are treated to this horrifying scene in which Spidey holds up Aunt May's severed head and screams at it. Yeesh.
Cheated. We find out about this one in Red Goblin, Red Death, and what's worse, it's a story that in the present day of that comic has a pretty gruesome ending. Here, Norman runs into an old Empire University pal, if you could call him that. Ned Tobolowsky was someone Norman knew in school, and it's implied that at least they were friends, or at least acquaintances, before Ned spilled the beans about a cheating apparatus that Norman was using and had built. Ned's big mouth almost cost Norman his schooling. He lost his scholarship and was almost expelled, like these close. Honestly, if he created a cheating machine though, he probably should have been expelled in my opinion. Like, I don't know how they let him continue going to school after that. Norman gets Ned back though when Ned stops him on the street years later while he is Red Goblin. Not a good time. So true, what happens to Ned at least wasn't necessarily Green Goblin's doing, but I'm gonna count this anyways because 1, this thing happened way in his past, and 2, this list is more centered around Osborn as Goblin as opposed to like any specific Goblin identity. It's called Green Goblin, but I'm approaching it as like a Norman Osborn list. I know we've seen others wear that mantle as well, but I think Norman by far is one of the most dastardly goblins out there, red, green, or otherwise. Number 9, reshaped the universe. This one only gets ranked lower because it comes to us from the alternate reality of a what if comic. In this what if story, Norman Osborn gets his hands on the Infinity Gauntlet and uses it to reshape reality, all to impress his daddy. What's even more awful is when his father confesses that he actually loves him. Norman then can't even bring himself to believe his father's acceptance, and in the end destroys his father, thereby destroying himself in the process. So this was in a weird way not just a bad thing he did to reality, but also did to his own self. Which I guess would be a good thing for reality. Definitely be a good thing for Spider-Man. Number 8, framed Spider-Man. If you think J. Jonah Jameson is bad, wait till you see what happens when Osborn takes over control of the Daily Bugle. At one point, Norman Osborn tries to use the paper himself to drag Spider-Man's name through the mud after buying it and then blackmailing Jameson into giving him full control over the paper and what gets published there. He then frames Spider-Man for murder, making it look like his webbing basically caused someone to die by asphyxiation, and puts a bounty on Spider-Man's head, starting off the Spider Hunt story arc. Of course, Peter finds a way out of all of this trouble and makes sure that Norman gets his in the end, but he still has to suffer through everyone hunting him down and believing that he was a killer, so still, it's pretty terrible. And before we move on to this next spot, just a quick reminder to give this video a thumbs up if you love Norman as much as we do. Love hate.
Number 7. Became a heartless killer and died. Introduced in What If Spider-Man vs. Wolverine in 2008, Assassin Spider-Man is a serious dude. This version of Spidey becomes an assassin that works alongside Wolverine. which sounds super awesome and not like one of the worst things to ever happen to him. However, he eventually becomes kind of jaded, with no qualms about killing and just doing whatever it takes to get the job done. Worse still, this version of Pete doesn't even make any quips or crack jokes like the Spidey we know and love. He literally has a gun in his web shooters. He is eventually recruited into the Spider Army, but later he tragically dies. Still not the worst thing to happen to Spider-Man.
Number 6, drove Harry insane. I mean, I don't think we can blame Norman for all of Harry's villainous actions, but we can definitely blame him, I think, for most of them. As of late, Harry has resurfaced as the villain known as Kindred, twisted into some combination of Harry's soul combined with that of a demon. This even darker version of Harry blames both Peter and his father for everything that went wrong in his life, and comes back to hold them both accountable and make them pay. I guess you could also look at it in the way that Norman and Peter share the blame here for Harry's psyche cracking. As in loving both of them and then discovering their true identities, it created great conflict in him, causing him to turn on Spider-Man and later also to resent his father and his role as Green Goblin. And kind of his legacy, really, because he also, kind of gets that crazy from his dad, just saying.
Number 5. Ditch the gear. Sometimes when you don't need something anymore, you drop it like it's hot. Like that scene from Forrest Gump where Forrest runs out of his leg braces. But now sometimes when you realize you don't need something and you get rid of it, sometimes you just happen to be Venom. And sometimes that thing you no longer need is Angelo Fortunato. So back in 2005, Marvel wanted to reboot Venom. So the new Venom host was Don Fortunato after he won the symbiote in an auction. What a great win, by the way. I would definitely bet on that. He gave the suit to his son Angelo to make him more tough. Okay, sure, it works. Hey, trust me, man, it works. Eddie warned him about the risks, but Angelo didn't listen. Angelo attacked Spider-Man and ripped out his heart, only to discover that it was just an imposter. And then after a fight with Spider-Man, Angelo just left out of fear. He was getting his butt kicked, he wanted nothing to do with it. And Venom wasn't a fan of that, so he left the host mid-air. He just dropped him like it's hot. But his gear wasn't working properly after the fight Angelo had just caused, so how unfortunate is that?
Number 4, killed JJ. That's right, while in main continuity, JJ would end up being blackmailed by Norman Osborn, in the Ultimate Universe, he would end up being murdered by him. I know, so crazy, especially considering that Jameson thought he had actually shot Norman dead and was in the middle of panicking over the fact. Norman, however, surprised him by getting up and transforming into his goblin self, revealing that in this universe, he was Immortal Green Goblin. Yep, before we had the Immortal Hulk series, we had this.
Number 3, became one of the 4 horsemen of Apocalypse. This has actually happened to Spider-Man on 2 different occasions. Once in Cable and Deadpool number 15 in 2005, and then again in Avengers Volume 4. In these 2 stories, Apocalypse unleashes his master plan for world domination, which includes recruiting 4 people he finds fit to be his Horsemen of the Apocalypse. The 2010 version is especially horrifying, with Spidey being horribly mutated into this hairy white beast, seemingly fused to a horse-like creature that looks like it's made of webbing. Being used by evil bad guys is bad enough, but being turned into a hideous monster for that is definitely not Spider-Man's finest hour.
Number 2, killed Gwen Stacy. We all know this one to be one of the worst things that Norman as the Green Goblin has done, so I don't think it's a surprise that this one is high up on our list. One of the worst, not just from Peter's perspective, by the way, but also from fans' perspectives. Many still believe that Gwen was actually the one destined to be with Peter, and in fact, that she would be a better match for him than Mary Jane herself. I personally love MJ and Peter together, and I like to think of Gwen's death as a what if that can only really ever theoretically be answered if she lived. Still, even just from Spider-Man's perspective, this has to be one of the most dastardly deeds his foe has ever committed, as Peter Parker for years has also still blamed himself for Gwen's demise, making this wound just that much more tender and that much more deep. Green Goblin did it, but then Peter still blamed himself. Rough. Number 1, had children with Gwen Stacy. It was really hard for me to try and reason which of these last few points was really the worst, because they're all really bad, especially these last two. Killing Gwen or having children with her. Which one is worse? In the end, however, considering that he later kills her, I figured this one took the cake. Yep, as if Norman Osborn wasn't diabolical and creepy enough in the comics, we had to retcon in something even more nauseating for him. Enter Sin's past. Here it's retconned in that Norman and Gwen slept together, and as if that wasn't bad enough, he got her pregnant. She gave birth to twins in secrecy in Europe who would be raised by Norman to think that Spider-Man was their father, and that it was he who had killed their mother. I'm not sure if it gets any worse than that, but if it does, I don't think I want to find out how it gets worse.
Number 10. Hulk smashed. When Loki tried to tame the Hulk in the first Avengers movie, he got ragdoll into cement in the Avengers Tower. It was kind of a funny moment for theaters, especially that little squeak that Tom Hiddleston lets out when he's lying there. It's so funny, it's great. Well, according to E. Paul Zare, who has a PhD in neuroscience, and Dr. Kirk McGee from the QEII Health Sciences Center, Loki would have been kind of screwed. He would have been in a lot of pain here. Due to the whip-like actions of the Hulk swinging him, Loki would apparently have a crushed skull, fractured vertebrae from the cervical or neck region all the way down to the lower back, broken ribs, dislocated hips, crushed tibia and fibula, and crushed metatarsal ankle bones. Loki would also suffer internal damage as well, like punctured lungs, a ruptured septum in the heart, a lacerated liver, ruptured spleen, kidney damage, and a ruptured bladder. Now, I get that he's part of the whole God Squad, but he's got to feel at least a few of these. And we have proof that he did feel those, because in Thor Ragnarok, when Thor gets ragdolled in a similar fashion, Loki gets up excitedly and says, "That's how it feels." So you can tell he's been thinking about this a bit. Number 9, stuck in a tree. Now I know that doesn't sound very frightening off the bat, but when it comes to Asgardian magic, this can be quite daunting. In Journey into Mystery issue 85, the first time we see Loki on the pages, before he even gets up to anything crazy in the comics, he was condemned by the gods to be trapped in a tree. In a tree! He's to remain there until somebody sheds a tear for him. Now, Loki, obviously, no one's gonna be crying over him, he was kind of the worst, but someone did cry. Someone did shed one tear for Loki. Might be a little bit different than you think. So he's been in this tree for ages now, but slowly and surely he's able to control the tree. And I don't mean like the trees from Wizard of Oz either, like not gonna huck apples at Odin. He can just manipulate the tree in small ways. So when Heimdall's passing that tree, he commands the tree to shed a leaf, and the timing was so perfect. The leaf just fell and then poked him right in his eye, causing, of course, a tear to fall after. And voila, we see Loki emerge from this tree and just run for it, just run for the hills. And his first plan of attack was to seek revenge on the one responsible for his tree time, Brother Thor. Number 8, rejected at birth. Before the monologues and ruling, Loki was just a kid born into royalty. He made his first comic book appearance in Venus, issue 6, and in the Silver Age he entered with Journey into Mystery, issue 85. His father was King Laufey, leader of the giants of Jotunheim, and Loki was born not a frost giant, but rather he was pretty petite. He was small and frail, so much so that his parents were actually kind of embarrassed to call him family. He wasn't even allowed to play with the other giants. Poor Loki, from birth he's had a rough go. But it only gets worse. Number 7, his true origins. It's gotta be a tough time to find out your parents aren't even your real parents. It happens quite often in these comics, but Loki was raised in the Odinson household, and he felt like he belonged there at least. Well, mostly. I mean, sure, Thor was the favorite brother and all, but he truly thought Odin and Frigga were his parents. So when Loki came into contact with the Casket of Ancient Winters, he actually thought he was cursed. Now, the Casket of Ancient Winters was safely stored in Odin's vault at this time, and we see it for the first time in the comics in Thor issue 346. And it made it to the big screen in 2011 in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. So the Casket of Ancient Winters is a relic that doubled down as a deadly weapon, belonging originally to the Frost Giants. So Loki felt this without even knowing his true heritage, and he still felt this power, and it has the ability to unleash the fury of 1,000 killing winters. So you open this thing and it's trouble. You better be ready for quite a rush. It took all of Heimdall's strength to just break through this ice when Loki used it against him later on in Thor 1. Coming from a guy who lives in Canada, it doesn't look too bad. Wear some layers, grab a coffee, you'll be fine. And before we continue on with this Loki list, if you want to go ahead and give this video a thumbs up, it looks just like that, maybe a little less nice. That would be great for our studio. It really does help us out quite a bit, especially while we're working from home for this last little chunk. It really does go a long way for us. So thank you so much for your patience and support. Let's get right back into this video. Number 6, solitary confinement. So after the events of the original Avengers movie, when Loki didn't steal the cosmic cube and break the timeline, he was actually sent back up to Asgard to do some time. Now in usual fashion, he attended a hearing where he was sentenced to life in the Asgardian dungeons. Now the only reason he was still alive in the first place is actually because of his mother, his adoptive mother Frigga. The trial was nuts. Loki got absolutely blasted. He was roasted. He was told his birthright was to die as a child, cast out on a frozen rock. So when he got cozy in confinement, his mother came in to say some last words to the fallen son. She was calm, she shared concern about his holding cell. It was a beautiful moment where you could tell Loki wasn't so evil after all. He wasn't manipulated from the cosmic cube anymore. He cared for his mother through all of this, and when he went out to touch her hand one last time, it ended up just being magic. She wasn't actually there. Now, funny enough, in a deleted scene, this moment is even more heartbreaking. The scene showed the two talking as they did in the final cut of Thor the Dark World, but Frigga told Loki that a true king admits his faults. And then Loki responds with, well, Odin's not my real father, so you're not my real mother. Number 5, cursed advice. Algrim the Strong was a lieutenant of the Dark Elves leader Malekith, and he was serving his master Malekith, you know, the MCU's best villain, Malekith, him. Algrim was locked up with Loki at the same time in those dungeons. He actually sacrificed his life to become the last of the cursed. Much like Loki in Avengers 1, he too got locked up with bigger intentions. So once he transformed using the Curse Stone and he punched his way out of the dungeons, he debated setting Loki free, but again, he was frail and small, so he's like, no. Walking away, Loki tipped him off to the best escape route to the Asgardian shield generator. And after Curse demolishes that, the other Dark Elves were able to invade Asgard, and then Curse met up with Malekith, and after failing to retrieve the Aether, Curse stabbed Frigga in the back with her own sword. To think Loki helped this guy out, that's crazy. He's like, hey, try those stairs, you get there faster. And then now his mom's dead. Way to go, Loki. This was after he chose not to free Loki as well, so Loki just gave the advice just cuz. Number 4, eaten by his father. Yeah, this one's, oof. In War of the Realms, the Dark Elf Malekith returns from imprisonment, starts a war in his homeworld of Svartalheim, and was crowned a king. The next step was to assemble the League of Allies from across the 10 realms, forming the Dark Council. Now among those was King Laufey and Loki. Now a family discussion breaks out. Laufey confesses to Loki that he's the worst thing to ever come from his loins. Nice use of the word loins there, good stuff. And he referred to him as his one great shame. As if the roast wasn't hard enough, he proceeds to eat Loki with a very loud crunch to go along with the visuals. Yum. Number 3, beaten to death. In the 2004 Loki series, it picks up with Loki claiming leadership of Asgard. It's a dream come true this time around. He has the throne officially, but the throne life isn't what he expected, really. Those who helped Loki become a king now want him to continue and fulfill his promises. So Loki would now go to his prisoners, Thor and Lady Sif, for some ruling advice, you know, one of those. It's like when somebody becomes manager and they don't know how to manage, so they're like, how do I do this? And you're like, I'm making $12, man, I don't know, you gotta figure this one out. After some events, it's decided that Thor will be beheaded the next day at dawn. But in typical Loki fashion, he went against fate and opted not to follow through last minute. He spared his brother and freed him, but Hela was actually revealed to be another version of Loki, just used as an illusion to get Thor killed. So when Thor was free, he was like, you know what, I'm just gonna finish this myself. And he beat Loki to death. It was brutal. Number 2, killed by Thanos. Yeah, we gotta mention this one. I'd say it's a pretty bad day. The final scenes of Thor Ragnarok, we find Thor and Loki aboard the new ship, the new Asgard, after the old one got blown to smithereens. Loki looks at Thor and tells him how much he reminds him of Odin. It's a very sweet moment between the brothers. Finally, they're close and they're ready to do some good. Then all of a sudden, this big ship approaches and audience knew who it was right off the bat. Loki met his fate before the title card even appeared in Avengers Infinity War. He tried to go out like a hero and he put his tricks to use, but Thanos saw it coming. And the crack we hear in Loki's neck is, I still hear it in my head. No resurrections this time, Thanos says, before dropping his lifeless blue body on the floor of the ship. Right before Loki gets the chokey, he does say something to Thor that stuck with him and fans. He assures them that the sun will shine on them again. So I'm hoping that Loki comes out of this alive somehow. I think the Disney show is gonna bring him back in a way like they did with Vision. It's possible. And finally, number 1, TVA trouble. Loki is quick on his feet. Even when he was in the midst of being detained after Avengers 1, he still got his hands on the Tesseract for 2 seconds in Endgame, and poof, now he was gone, disrupting all these timelines. Now this probably felt good in the moment. He's like, yes, the Cosmic Cube, here we go, time to make a getaway. But luckily for us, the Time Variance Authority was waiting for him. He gets arrested by them, his clothes get ripped off, he is now a prisoner of the TVA. Now, the TVA is the Time Variance Authority. It's an organization that protects timelines, and Owen Wilson is his character named Agent Mobius, and he explains to Loki that they need him to restore the timelines. Now, this is going to be a fun series. I've actually been looking forward to this, I think, the most since all of these shows were announced. Right beside WandaVision, I'm like, it's going to be good. The fact that this is 2012 Loki again is just the icing on the timeline cake. I'm excited to see more of this character arc on screen because we missed like 4 years from when he became a king at the end of Thor 2, and then we cut to Thor Ragnarok and it was like a comedy buddy cop movie. Like, I want to see that dark stuff in between. I want to see that dark Loki still. I want to see more monologues, more Mewling Quim comments, that kind of stuff. Now he's gonna be DB Cooper? Let's go, sign me up.
Number 10, United Villains. It almost felt like Loki was trying to make up for doing something really good for the heroes in the world and for, causing a bunch of harmful things for himself when he brought the Avengers together with this plot. During the Acts of Vengeance crossover, Loki, under the guise of a businessman, used his skills as a master manipulator to bring together the Prime Movers, a very contradictory team of powerful villains who all hated the Avengers and heroes in general, and sought to destroy them by attacking them with less conventional villains. The team was made up of Dr. Doom, Kingpin, Mandarin, Wizard, Magneto, and Red Skull, and their plan was actually pretty solid. It sounds like it wouldn't work, but it actually worked pretty well. However, even Loki couldn't manage to keep the group together, and they ended up breaking up, mostly due to everyone's mutual hatred of Red Skull. Which, yeah, I get it. Also, when you put Magneto and Red Skull on a team together, I mean, what do you expect to happen? They're obviously gonna break up. It's a terrible match. Number 9, formed the Avengers. If you thought Nick Fury brought the Avengers together, then you might be surprised to hear this. In the comics, however, it was not Fury's plot that brought all of Earth's mightiest heroes together, but Loki's. Granted, Loki hadn't planned on doing so, and in the end it actually resulted in way more trouble for him and many other villains in the Marvel-verse besides than he could have ever imagined. Loki was the first villain the team would come up against in Avengers issue number 1, and the villain who would unite them together. Much like in the MCU actually, but with less scepters and invasions and with more tricks and illusions and like magic. Loki tricked the Hulk into destroying a train track, thereby endangering human lives. And although no one was hurt because the Hulk actually saved everyone from his own breaking of the train track, the people still saw the Hulk as a monster, and it was this event that brought the Avengers together. In the end, it was revealed that Loki was behind all of it, and the Avengers ended up uniting to defeat him. So yeah, this was one of the worst things Loki kinda did to himself even. That's super tricksy. Number 8, Thor croaks. Are we going to talk about the frog thing? You bet we're gonna talk about the frog thing, because this is a part 1, so we gotta talk about it. One of the most bizarre and yet great schemes Loki has committed to date was when he devised to have Thor turn into a frog in order to get his do-good brother out of the way so that he might rule Asgard in his place. Not only is this awful because turning your brother into a frog is never a nice thing to do, but we aren't just talking about anyone here. This is Thor. The transformation was even worse for the God of Thunder, who often prides himself on his prowess and strength as a warrior. As a frog, he was robbed of his natural sense of courage and his eagerness for battle initially, and as Frog Thor, he had to rediscover this before eventually, of course, being returned to his standard form and getting revenge back on Loki, because that's how this always goes, unless we're in like an alternate Earth. Number 7, was defeated? But how can this be the worst? Well, because it put Loki in a position of great power, and he would have gotten away with it too if it wasn't for his meddling brother Thor. Some theorize that in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, Loki actually allowed himself to be defeated by the Avengers in that first film. The whole invading Earth wasn't actually something he wanted or needed, but it was actually all part of a grander scheme to get caught and then be put in exactly the place he needed and in fact wanted to be in order for him to later take over Asgard. Of course, we don't know if this is true or if he was really the puppet in an even greater scheme where Thanos was the master the whole time, which does kind of sound more likely, but I like to think that almost everything has been part of Loki's plan, including any deaths he's seemingly suffered, because he's just a master manipulator. Also, all these deaths are all fake, and I don't believe any of them. I see you, Loki. Even that last one. We got that last one, everyone was like, oh, he's definitely dead, and I was like, he'll be back. I don't believe it. And he is back now. Granted, it's a different version of him, but still, I'm gonna take it and I'm gonna say, don't believe any of it. Don't believe any deaths. They're all lies. Number 6. Impersonated Scarlet Witch. And while impersonating her, also kinda made out with Clint Barton, who was Ronin at the time. In fact, this is one of the things that tipped the heroes off to her true identity, because apparently Clint has some kind of magical kissing power. Wait a minute, that's not Scarlet Witch. I would know her kiss anywhere. Since when did Clint and Wanda make out enough for him to be able to identify her kiss instantly? Also, how different are Loki's and Wanda's kissing styles? I want to know. Like, are they radically different? Are they a little different? What level are we talking about here? Loki's plan here, of course, was to impersonate Wanda so he could help create his own team of Avengers, which he would then use against Norman Osborn. Perhaps he was resentful because he wasn't invited to Osborn's Dark Avengers? How rude. While multiple people were suspicious that it wasn't Wanda, eventually Loki's illusion was broken fully by Wiccan, Wanda's reincarnated, formerly self-constructed son. I hope that makes sense to you. That's what he is, I don't know. Before we move on to the next spot, it's time to do that thing. You know that thing where you click that like button if you are liking this video. Yeah, do the thing. Number 5. Betrayed Thor. Was anyone surprised? No, not even Thor was surprised on this one, but it didn't make it any less awful. This moment comes to us from the Marvel Cinematic Universe. In Thor Ragnarok, after Loki and Thor finally seem to be willing to put the past behind them and work together for once to save Asgard, Loki decides to betray his brother yet again. He plans to alert the authorities and have Thor captured in exchange for a hefty reward, meaning that Thor would be likely eternally imprisoned and trapped on Sakaar, which would also leave Asgard eternally doomed with Hela in charge. Easier to let it burn, Loki says, before Thor reveals he was expecting the betrayal and tases him remotely. Number 4. Tried to fool the X-Men and almost succeeded. During the 80s, Alpha Flight and X-Men had a team-up 2-part story, which of course started with both teams fighting one another, but all due to a greater misunderstanding. And yeah, actually Alpha Flight during the 80s was a big thing. It was huge. We don't talk about Alpha Flight much anymore, but they were a big deal back then. Loki was up to some sneaky business here where he was trying to convince the northern gods that he was, trying to help mortals, that he was a good guy, when really he was trying to create chaos. Surprise, surprise. He had a fire fountain at his disposal, which not only sounds super flashy, but also granted magical clothing and cool powers to mortals, as well as I believe eternal life. The X-Men ended up in the city containing the fire fountain after their plane went down and crashed landed. In the end, Alpha Flight, who went to investigate and found them, who had a quick tussle with their friends, who at the time thought the city was great, before Loki revealed himself and the mutants were able to unite to defeat him after learning that the powers, magic clothing, and eternal life granted came with a price. The destruction of magical beings like Alpha Flight member Snowbird. Oh no, Snowbird! Fortunately, Loki was foiled, but this was a pretty diabolical plot. Number 3. Bartered with Enchantress's hand. Not my hand! But also, this is very serious. I don't know why I'm laughing, it's very serious, this is terrible. Loki did this not once even, but twice. Both times Idun was not even consulted, and the second time around, she was full on tricked by Loki. Idun was known as the keeper of golden apples. She is very important to the Asgardian people because of her being the only person who can pick the golden apples, which are what grant the Asgardians their eternal youth and vitality, making them immortal as well. So it's a really important job. The first time, it was Loki who promised, but also managed to avoid Enchantress being married off, but this only resulted in greater trouble for Thor when it was revealed the mason he had bartered with was actually a frost giant in disguise. So he tricked him and then he kind of had to fight a frost giant. That's where Thor comes in. The second time, he once again promised her hand to a frost giant in order to save his own skin from starvation and from his own banishment. This time around, Thor once again had to save the day, but Idun was still imprisoned for a time and likely traumatized from the whole experience in the end. Number 2. Stole Sif's body. This has to be by far one of the worst things that Loki has done. And what's worse, he did it for the most petty of reasons. Like many of his antics, it was simply to piss off Thor. At first, Thor actually wondered why Loki had returned to life resurrected in a female form, but Loki played it off as just like, oh, this is just some coincidence, I just happened to be reincarnated in a female body, don't worry about it. Later, however, we'd learn about the horror that Lady Loki really was. Loki in Sif's body, having stolen her body, the body of his enemy, to parade around in and just use as he pleased. Ugh. This also greatly affected Lady Sif even after she had her body back. She remarked how even though she was supposed to be this strong and fearless warrior, she found herself trembling at the slightest unknown shadow, terrified that Loki was lurking around a corner waiting to return and claim her body as his own. Ugh, I don't like that. Number 1, killed his younger self. Kid Loki was one of the best versions of Loki we'd ever got. And by best, I mean the most honest, the most true, the kindest, the most heroic. He was a trickster, but a seemingly innocent one, a nice one. Kid Loki was on a path of redemption. He was basically a hero, but not even Loki could let Loki redeem himself, seeing that no one would ever see him as anything other than the god of lies, no matter how much good he did. King Loki took out revenge on everyone around him, eventually even killing his own more naive persona and self, Kid Loki. Or really, more younger Loki at this point. Basically, Kid Loki is like a younger version of King Loki. It's all Loki, but yeah, he killed the nicest Loki. Sad.
Number 10, his origins. Of course, we have to start at the beginning. Ultimate Loki entered the chat in Ultimates 2, issue 1. He is the son of Odin and Farbadi. He was born basically as a peace settlement between Asgard and Jotunheim. So Loki, half-brother Thor, and Balder were the original Warriors 3 here. So Loki would battle these frost giants, they fought in the 1,000-Year War, and finally the Asgardians were deemed the victors. So the 3 of them now entered this tournament with other Asgardian warriors, and that's where he was defeated by his brother Thor for the first time. Number 9, a message. So while the brothers were fighting, Loki was warning Thor at the same time. You know, the usual monologue while we're fighting. Now as the battles begin, Loki strikes Thor, and Thor gets a little excited. He's like, oh, that's how we're gonna be, brother, let's do it. Or whatever, you know, they sound like. I'm not man enough to do the oh. He's like, okay, that's how it's gonna be, I see, let's do it. So while they're fighting, Loki begins to warn Thor of what's gonna come after their victories. He tells Thor that they're getting ready to enter very dangerous times, and Thor is confused. He's like, I'm sorry, I thought we just beat everybody. That's why we're celebrating, no? And that's the whole point of this. It's over, we won. Now Loki agrees, but in doing so, this victory, it ended a stalemate that existed for 1,000 years. Now during war, they know who they were. Now that it's over, now what? Who are these guys? What do they have to do now? Now everything changes. Balder comes in after beating those other guys, and he and Thor kept battling, both pretty much ignoring Loki and his warning. Classic. Thor pulls his hammer out to light the place up whilst presenting the victor of the battle, Balder. And before we continue on with this list, if you want to go ahead and give this video a thumbs up, that would be awesome. It's really helpful for us on our channel. You guys are the best. Thank you for your support. Let's get right back to this video. Number 8, he killed Balder. Spoiler warning, let's do it now while we're at it. So the Warriors 3, they didn't last long after this, because when Loki went to go visit his mother, who was now a prisoner of Odin, she asked him for a favor. She asked Loki to bring her the Norn stones, which contains Odin's power, much like the hammer. So while Loki was stealing those stones, he had to do something pretty dark and terrible. He fired an arrow through the helmet of Heimdall, and yes, the helmet was on his head. So just like that, bam, it was one shot, perfect aim, he nailed it. His favorite bow too, might I add. So Loki also had to take out his other half-brother Balder with his favorite bow. He just loves the bow thing, it's crazy. And that's of course when he was banished from Asgard, which makes sense. He should have been banished a little sooner, but that's fine. Better late than never. So while he was talking to Balder, he made him use his gifts and tell Loki what the future holds. Now Balder responds with, okay, Asgard is in ruins, your mother is dead for her betrayal, and you, Loki, you believe in nothing and you are lost. All salt and no spirit. Burn, that's a roast. There is no tomorrow with his chaos. And then Loki asks what Balder sees in his future before releasing that fateful arrow. Number 7, Baron Zemo. In 1939, supervillain Baron Zemo rose to take over Asgard. Well, it wasn't actually Baron Zemo, it was the Lord of Mischief himself, which you probably could have guessed. He planned an attack on Asgard and his backup was quite intimidating. He had German soldiers and frost giants ready to fight all under his command. Now after a quick Heimdall cocktail, all of these soldiers and giants were just amped up. The Norn stones mixed with Heimdall's blood, yup, it just empowered them. And just as he told Thor, trouble is indeed on its way. Chaos ensued, but luckily Odin stepped in and banished Loki to one of the worst rooms ever. The room without doors. How do we get out? How do we get in? Nobody knows. Nobody knows. So Loki apologizes before he disappears, and he says he's sorry. Sorry for nothing, that is. Oh, had him in the first half. You thought. Number 6, Ragnarok. So Loki was sent to the room without doors, but the gang wasn't out of the woods yet. We still have to deal with the giant army, duh. So Odin was then attacked by the leader of the frost giants, Mammon, and once Thor took care of that, he went to check in on his father, and as he was fading away, the world tree began to burn. And as Odin died, so did Asgard. So Thor was a little upset at this point, a little upset. So he went on a bit of a rampage, as he should. Now, what ended up happening here was because the Ultimate comic goes back and forth now, back then, before returning to Asgard, Loki had left those Norn stones with a young soldier named Helmet, and also instructions on what to do with them. So he's not like, cool, is that a sapphire? What is this gem? What are these gems? So cut to 60 years later, Thor is on Earth, Helmet opens this portal to the room without doors, and Loki is now free. Thing is, Loki was still a god when he went in. He hasn't gone anywhere, whereas Thor and Balder were reborn as mortal men. So now we got a problem. Number 5, Loki's return. So the god of mischief is back again, and he spent some time under house arrest, and following the failed Chitauri invasion, Loki teamed up with the Liberators in an attempt to take down the Ultimates, which sounds bad enough, but then he also had plans to start World War III. Because, you know, why not? In Ultimates issue 2, Loki used his reality-changing abilities and created the identity of Gunnar Goldman, member of the Norwegian Super Soldier program, and he used Thor's past life as Thorleif in order to make Thor seem like he's going insane. And it worked. Now, he wasn't quite done there, however. See, Loki had also tried to frame Captain America for what happened to Clint's family. He was blending in as a leader, not using his powers, or else Odin would be able to find him, but I'll get into that a little later on. Now, thankfully, the Liberators weren't able to defeat the Ultimates, but Loki still wanted to try after failing this many times. So he attacked the Ultimates again, but the Scarlet Witch and her probability powers summoned Thor, so that didn't happen. Number 4, banished again. Okay, so Thor returns with the hammer this time, Loki is totally screwed, and Thor decides that it's probably best to finish the trickster off. But with Loki and his powers, it's evidently not an easy task, especially when Loki summons an army of Asgardian monsters. It's heated, and then Odin came down to bring the pain himself. Odin too sent some Guardian warriors and removed most of Loki's powers. So those hammer hits from Thor are going to start to leave a mark. So he reverted back to his old ways and he tried to talk himself out of these situations. So he ranted about how he was jealous of Thor, how he wanted to see him finally go down. He even took a jab at us humans for some reason. He's like, look at these fools. They believed all these illusions. Look how stupid they are. They bought it. Meanwhile, I'm like, that's nice. That's really nice. So Thor does a trick of his own and sends Loki right back to Asgard to atone for his sins. But guess what? Number 3, he got out again. Get out of town. Loki? No way. How? Loki somehow got free from Odin and tried to take on Thor yet again, but this time with trolls as backup. He wanted to annoy Thor to a point where he would just go nuts, and then Thor would be the one to lose control and destroy Earth. Like I would do to my older brother all the time. I would bug him, then he'd swear, then I'd tell on him for swearing, and then he'd get grounded. Easy, right? You're welcome. Thing is, Loki ended up taking out Valkyrie, Thor's girlfriend, which never happened in our family, thank God. But this got heated, right? Where Hela had to get involved now. Hela brought Valkyrie back to life, this time as a real Valkyrie, and then she killed Loki. See ya, pal. He went straight to the underworld, straight to hell. But even there, he planned for yet another escape. You gotta respect the hustle, he doesn't quit. Number 2, powers and weaknesses. So we're gonna see many tricks from Loki in this Disney show, and in the Ultimates alone, Loki's abilities are quite impressive. To see a handful of these would just spoil us. He can shuffle space and time, as I mentioned before, but there's a lot to that. So any attacks against Loki are fixable because he can just alter his own godly strength to resist said injuries. He can make you talk to a person that's not even there, make you look absolutely insane, and with multiple copies of Loki, not only will you get a headache from all the monologues, but he's equally as strong as Thor with those numbers. His weaknesses come from his home life, of course. Odin can control quite a bit of this chaos. So if Loki uses all of his power, full capacity, Odin will be able to find him. It's like yelling really loud. They're like, why is he yelling? Oh, it's Loki. Get over here. During Ultimates 2, Thor mentions that Loki's powers had weakened, and it was unclear why at that point. But later on, comments from Loki implied that Odin was the reason behind this all along. And finally, number 1, his death. It's no surprise Loki escaped from hell afterwards when Asgard came to Earth, and during the attack of the Children of Tomorrow, Loki finally met his fate while battling alongside other Asgardians, but not Thor. See, Thor is now in Valhalla at this point. He got released, but he had to have a child with Hela first, so his hands were full. So Thor was able to see Loki's ghost as well as other Asgardians and his nephew Modi, and you can find the last of Ultimate Loki in Ultimates Volume 2, Issue 2. Number 10, Kid Loki. One of the versions of Loki that we're rumored to get in the Disney Plus original is Kid Loki. Jack Veal's name has been whispered through the winds, and honestly, I could see it. I mean, look at him. He looks very Tom Hiddleston-y. Now in the comics, Kid Loki too was also a nuisance. Kid Loki came around in Thor issue 617. Now after adult Loki sacrificed himself for Asgard, he was sent with the Dark Avengers from Norman Osborn, and he had a change of heart in regards to, well, Asgard's fate. He returned to Earth looking better than ever, just with a few memories from his previous life. A little young Tot with a few memories, it's cool. Even when he's commanding the Dark Avengers and changes sides, he always has a backup plan. So that's what makes this character so compelling. This guy died 3 times in the MCU, and he's probably gonna die 4 times more. Maybe even 5 times, I don't know. I'm gonna bet 3 times. He's gonna die 3 times in the show. I could see them killing him once an episode, kind of like South Park Kenny style, you know? Now Kid Loki's cool because he travels with a companion, a trusty magpie named number 9, the Devil. Okay, this first one isn't exactly shocking. One of the many versions of Loki, and one of the earliest, was in Venus issue 6, back in the late 40s, back in the 1940s, that's so old. See, Loki at this time was banished from Olympus to the Olympian underworld of Hades by Zeus. It's unclear what exactly he did, but considering the fact that he's referred to as Satan, it could be literally anything. I mean, insert bad thing here, you know? But he had a son, appropriately named Son of Satan. Okay, better than Kyle, I don't know. Is it? No. The two of them were punks. They were obsessed with being romantically involved with Venus. I mean, sure, she's the goddess of love and all, but the both of you want her? It's kind of weird. It's gross. It's a gross dynamic. What an awkward drive that must be. Loki's son disguised himself. He went to the offices of Beauty Magazine where Venus worked, and then he's like, "Hi, I'm Mr. Saturn." Like, pick a new name. First of all, way too close. They're like, "Satan?" He's like, "No, it's Saturn." Damn, that was close. Now his son was insane. He would cause these natural disasters on Earth, because you know, love. So Venus finally agreed to be with him, and then when he stopped fighting, Venus hucked a fireball at him and made him orbit the planet for all of eternity. So Devil or Kid Devil, whatever version you're getting, doesn't matter. Loki always wants the attention. Number 8, Ickle, which is Loki backwards if you didn't catch that already. So in Journey into Mystery issue 622, Kid Loki needed to figure out why he was reborn, right? All these memories have now vanished, so what's going on? So he transported himself to a hidden chamber where he met a spirit, the ghost of Christmas past. Nay, he met the spirit of himself from the past. So he caught Kid Loki up and explained why he wanted this fresh start, a free future. And Kid Loki was like, "Hold up, let me help you out here. How about you stop the whole being a spirit thing and I'll just turn you into a magpie." So now he's a magpie. Loki is now a magpie. Okay. Kid Loki now has a pretty exciting partner. A cute partner too, might I add. Little red eyes. How lovely. Number 7, Gunnar Goldman. Loki is a master of tricks. He can turn himself into a snake, make himself look like Steve Rogers, but when he takes the disguise of Norwegian super soldier Gunnar Goldman in the Ultimates, he makes Thor look like he's losing his mind. He makes everybody think that Thor is just a super soldier gone rogue, who has this magic belt that gives him Thor's powers. Thing is, this belt has been referenced in the MCU. Happy lists it off when he's packing up for moving day in Spider-Man Homecoming. So the Ultimates of course believe Gunnar, and they're just about to attack Thor, but alas, the day is saved and Loki's schemes come to an end. For now. Number 6, Sleipnir. There have been a few origins for Sleipnir, and for this list we're gonna go with the more fun one. Also the more kind of gross one. So Odin tasked Loki to handle this situation, okay? So the situation was this dude came along and offered to fix Asgard's wall, but the terms were shady. See, if he completed the wall within 6 months, he would be awarded the moon, the sun, and Freya. The 3 things we all want in life. So they waited until the last brick, and then Loki turned into this. He turned into a beautiful white mare and lured the man's horse away. Because see, the man turned out to be, well, not a man at all. He was rather a frost giant in disguise. So after the deal was made, Odin's like, "Oh, did we just shake on that?" So Loki led his horse away, disguised also as a horse, while Thor handled the big guns himself. Now, if you thought that was a cool trick, let me tell you, Loki is so committed that he straight up gave birth after this to Sleipnir later on. Number 5, Scarlet Witch. This would mess things up a lot if Loki decided to do this. He's posed as an Avenger in the past a couple times now. He's taken on the form of Captain America, briefly, but in Mighty Avengers 21, Dark Reign, Henry Pym is put in charge to lead this new team. Now at this point, S.H.I.E.L.D. has fallen and Norman was running the Dark Avengers, so Scarlet Witch was calling the shots. But it's a list of alternate Lokis, and I just did this, so you're probably onto something. Loki's idea was to pose as the Maximoff twin to go against Osborn's team, but there was another twin that was onto something as well. Wanda's son Wiccan cast a spell that exposed Loki. So smart. Imagine if Wanda in the MCU is like, oh, Westview? That was Loki. Number 4, King Loki. Coming from the 2004 Loki miniseries, readers got to see Loki in a spot that he's been trying to be in for a very long time. The throne. Now we saw him take the throne at the end of Thor the Dark World, then the next time we saw him in Ragnarok he was disguised as Odin, eating grapes, watching some theater, while the realm spun into chaos. Now in the story he does more than Home Aloning it. See, King Loki defeats Thor in the story, and he has Asgard in his grasp. Now if you're looking to see an entirely new take on the character, check out these 4 issues coming from the mind of Rob Roddy with pencils by Sad Ribic. Now I have no doubt we're going to see Loki's ruling in this show, so you might want to freshen up as well. Number 3, 616 Loki. Of course, one of the earliest versions of the character came to us from Stan Lee. It was introduced to readers in Journey into Mystery issue 85. Before Loki ends up getting up to anything crazy or godlike in the comics, he already was condemned by the gods, and his punishment was actually pretty brutal. He was stuck in a tree, not like up in a tree, like inside of a tree. He's to remain there until somebody sheds a tear for him. Now he's been in there ages, so at this point nobody really gives a damn. And then over time he begins to finally understand how to control the tree. Not like Harry Potter style, but you know, he can move a branch or two. So when Heimdall is passing by, he commands the tree to shed a leaf, and the timing was just so perfect. The leaf drifted right into his eye, boink, and then voila, we have now a shedded tear that was caused because of Loki, technically. And his first plan of attack was to seek revenge against the one responsible for his hashtag tree time, Thor. And number 2, Lady Loki. Okay, so Lady Loki is practically confirmed for the Loki show. In a Vanity Fair interview, Loki's head writer Michael Waldron hinted that some Loki love stories are in the first season. And I know they say opposites attract, but Loki and Lady Loki sounds too good to pass up. She came around in Marvel Comics originally during Avengers Disassembled, when Loki stole a body that was intended for Lady Sif. So perhaps, and I know this is a reach, perhaps they could explain her absence in the MCU by maybe introducing this Lady Loki and then using that story in some way, shape, or form. It could also set up some interesting timeline changes with Thor, Love, and Thunder. Or it could be just like 2014's Loki's Agent of Asgard, where Loki just disguises himself as a woman. But I feel like Sophia DiMartino will be her own version of the character. I'm honestly looking forward to anything we get. I'm looking forward to all these new characters and relationships that are coming with this show. All these alternate timeline stuff is fine, but Owen Wilson, Lady Loki, like yes. All the yes. And finally, number 1, 2012 Loki. Remember when the world was supposed to end in 2012? Well, that was the case for the MCU as well. Perhaps one of the worst versions of Loki is the main Loki we're getting for this TV show. When he failed to take over the world in 2012's Avengers, he got another chance thanks to, well, the Avengers. They decided a time heist in New York was the best way to bring back half the population, and while it worked, sure, for the most part, give or take a few casualties, the team was forced to run the clock back even more in history after they lost the Tesseract. Now, in that version, Loki grabbed it and vanished. Now, after this long, we get to now find out just where he went, and this is an interesting time for the Trickster because he sacrificed his life at the beginning of Infinity War to try and save the day, but he promised to Thor right before he got the old Loki chokey, he promised to Thor that the sun would shine on them again someday. So could this show be that someday? Could this be the glimpse of hope? Now in trailers and clips, it looks like one of these episodes will feature a what if type scenario. We see Loki standing in front of New York City, only it looks much worse, and the Avengers Tower is out of commission. It's practically fallen to the ground. So I'm hoping we're gonna get to see an evil 2012 Loki again. This is gonna be really dark. Whatever happens in that episode doesn't look good at all. Whatever happened here and whatever timeline could point to Loki finally being the king of Asgard. Possibly. What do you guys think?
Coming in at number 10, we have Morgan Edge, the founder of Intergang. An international crime syndicate working in the shadows across the entire globe, Intergang was created while Morgan was being manipulated and tutored by Darkseid, who had been sending visions to Morgan ever since he was just a little boy. Appearing to the public to be the charismatic leader of a media corporation and a potential rival to Lex Luthor, Morgan was secretly running one of the world's biggest crime empires, all in the service of an intergalactic warlord. Some people just do it for the money, but Morgan Edge had a different sort of reasoning entirely, and even after cutting ties with Darkseid, would go on to help form the Superman Revenge Squad. Coming in at number 9, we have Sal Maroni, one of the biggest mob bosses in all of Gotham City without any superpowers. Known for having zero regard for human life and having even supervillains think he's a cold-hearted murderer, Sal's most iconic moment was actually the creation of a villain later in this list, when he threw acid in the face of District Attorney Harvey Dent and permanently scarred both his face and his soul. And while this acid attack was retconned during the New 52 into having been committed by someone else in Harvey Dent's life, Sal continues to appear in Batman comics as a vicious and intimidating mafia figure. Coming in at number 8, we have Tobias Whale, the arch enemy of Black Lightning. An African-American albino crime lord that originally got his start as the leader of the gang known as the 100 in Metropolis, he's worked his way through many different criminal organizations over the years, even serving as a public face for Intergang for a time. His most notable criminal act occurred after the school teacher Jefferson Pierce spoke out against Tobias's drug trafficking, which Tobias repaid by murdering one of Jefferson's students. This incident was what prompted Jefferson to become the hero Black Lightning in the first place, and while it may have added a superhero to the world, Tobias's brutal way of sending a message shows that he's one of the most powerful crime bosses in all of Metropolis. Coming in at number 7, we have Carmine Falcone, potentially the most powerful member of the criminal underworld that isn't also a billionaire or wears a supervillain outfit. Falcone is the definition of traditional organized crime in Gotham City. Nicknamed the Roman because of his political violence and eagerness to expand his criminal empire, Falcone was one of the earliest foes of the Batman and had nearly the entire Gotham police force on his payroll during the Caped Crusaders' earliest days. And while Batman has since been able to shrink Falcone's influence over Gotham significantly, he's still a dangerous foe that likes to press his advantage every time there's a power vacuum amongst the many supervillains of Gotham City. And speaking of supervillains, coming in at number 6, we're finally getting to Harvey Dent, aka Two-Face. Originally fighting on the side of justice with Bruce Wayne as Gotham's district attorney, Harvey Dent's mind was split in two following an acid attack from Sal Maroni that scarred exactly one half of his face. Making all of his decisions through a coin flip based on his past childhood trauma, Two-Face is one of the most well-known villains of Batman, and has managed to turn his tragic scarring incident into a criminal empire, capable of going toe-to-toe with criminals that Harvey Dent had once put behind bars. He might be crazy and his methods may seem randomly 50-50, but Two-Face is definitely still smart enough to be one of Gotham's most devious criminals. Coming in at number 5, we have Waylon Jones, aka the infamous Killer Croc. Born with a medical condition that just may be alien in nature and gives him the appearance of a human-crocodile hybrid, Killer Croc initially used his overpowered figure to wrestle with crocodiles for a local circus. However, he soon found out that the world of Gotham's criminal underbelly was far more lucrative for someone of his bloody talents, and became a rising star on the criminal scene, ascending so fast that many other supervillains attempted to kill him before he could become too big of a threat, including the Joker. Ever since, Killer Croc has been considered one of the most dangerous people in Gotham and one of of the few criminals willing to literally eat his enemies. Coming in at number 4, we have Roman Sionis, aka Black Mask. A longtime Batman villain and one of the most prominent figures in the Gotham City underworld, Black Mask is best well known for his, well, black mask, apparently handcrafted out of the coffin of his own mother. Originally a member of the Gotham elite as the CEO of Janus Cosmetics, Roman fell into ruin after his company failed. Blaming Bruce Wayne for his own poor business sense, Roman embraced the name of Black Mask and formed his own criminal organization called the False Face Society, intending to fight back and reclaim the city that he thinks has done him so much wrong. Coming in at number 3, we have Oswald Cobblepot, aka the Penguin. The owner of the Iceberg Lounge, perhaps the most famous criminal hangout in all of Gotham, the Penguin might look similar to his namesake, but is far more deadly in reality. While an impressive crime lord even without any superhuman enhancements, the Penguin is made extra deadly by the special umbrella he carries, which is always stuffed to the brim with different lethal gadgets to help him fight against Batman or any other supervillain that seems interested in starting a turf war. Coming in at number 2, we have the one and only Lex Luthor. Hating the idea of an alien like Superman having so much power and receiving so much love on planet Earth, Lex Luthor has been everything from a mad scientist to a ruthless businessman to even the President of the United States in his desperate quest to rid the world of the Man of Steel once and for all. Throughout all of this, Lex has secretly run one of the world's most high-tech criminal enterprises, using his various connections with other criminals to further his own schemes and either aid LexCorp or hurt Superman. He may be merely a human being, but Lex is a criminal with enough power to stand up to Superman. And finally, coming in at our top spot, we have the one and only Joker. With so many interpretations and versions over the years, there's one aspect of the Joker's character that seems to show up more often than not, and that's the amount of henchmen he's able to maintain control of despite his unpredictability and complete insanity. Despite all of that, the Joker's criminal empire is often capable of rivaling even those belonging to villains that have been meticulously plotting their crimes for decades. And because of his sheer unpredictability and the loyalty he's able to inspire in people crazy enough to follow him, the Joker just might be the most dangerous crime boss in the entire DC universe.
Number 10, Roche. Roche was the top crime lord in Madripoor initially. He was opposed by Tiger eventually, who was actually Jessan Hoan. Hoan was caught up in a Reaver attack while they targeted the bank she worked at. Because she was a lone survivor of that attack, she ended up kind of being ostracized by her family. As such, when Hoan learned that Roche was the mastermind behind the Reaver's attack, she dedicated her life to taking him down and becoming the new head honcho in Madripoor. She became Tiger and would eventually take down Roche with the help of Wolverine during his time as Patch. Roche himself didn't have any superpowers but was extremely well connected and was quite a physically strong opponent as well, especially for just being a guy. Number 9, Tombstone. Tombstone is a villain of Spider-Man who ended up getting into the world of crime and becoming a villain because he was severely mistreated as a child and tormented by the other kids he grew up with. This was what turned Tombstone, aka Lonnie Lincoln, into an antagonist for the other kids, training to become strong so that he could torment them right back, threatening them and of course stealing their lunch money, doing all the things that meanies do. From there, Tombstone would end up growing up and into the life of a criminal. He would become an enforcer and eventually would run his own operation, becoming a crime boss of New York. One of the crime bosses who was recently called on by the mayor of New York at the time, the Kingpin himself. And friends, before we move on to this next spot, if you are loving this list and you want to learn about even more crime bosses in the world of Marvel, of which of course there are many crime bosses out there, be sure to let us know by giving this video a thumbs up. Number 8, Madame Mask. Madame Mask is the daughter of Count Nefaria. She goes on to become a rival of Kate Bishop's, Hawkeye when Kate teams up with Clint in David Aja and Matt Fraction's Hawkeye series, but then decides to go her own way, heading out to live in LA. During her time there, Kate crosses paths once more with Madame Mask and her father, Count Nefaria. Mainly though, Kate pisses off Madame Mask, aka Giulietta Nefaria. Prior to that, Madame Mask was actually known for being an Iron Man villain, as well as sometimes an Iron Man ally and even an Iron Man love interest. Madame Mask has also worked alongside her father, and ultimately her allegiance often remains with her family, which means that no matter how many times she ends up on the straight and narrow, even becoming a borderline hero at times, she pretty much always returns to her criminal ways. Madame Mask, like her father, has also been allied with the Magia and worked as a criminal leader and mastermind for that organization. Number 7. Hobgoblin. While you might think it's weird to include a villain like Hobgoblin on this list, the fact remains that while Roderick Kingsley is also often known as the mastermind behind that mantle, a lot of his machinations have involved him using others to build his own criminal empire. In fact, at one point he literally turned the criminal lifestyle into a complete business. He sold old mantles and equipment of minor deceased or MIA villains. In exchange for these mantles, personas, and items, he received a cut of the earnings of those he gave them to. So basically, he didn't even need to be committing any crimes, but regardless, he would still profit from others' dastardly deeds. This is like more minor, but still power broker levels of criminal shenanigans. During this time, when Kingsley was the manager and owner of various villain franchises, he also allowed Phil Urich to continue to use the Hobgoblin mantle, but only if he also paid Kingsley for its use by giving him a cut. Number 6. Viper. Another rival crime lord that Tiger would eventually go up against was Ophelia Sarkissian, or as she is often known in the comics, Viper. Viper has often been in league with Hydra, but there have also been times when she's branched out on her own somewhat. For a time, Viper was actually the ruling monarch of Madripoor, seeing an opportunity to seize the nation and fill a gap after it was left without a monarch to rule over it. She ended up allying herself with Wolverine, who owed her a debt, in order to use his influence to seize control of Madripoor. And her plan? It worked. Wolverine was honor bound to Viper and did agree to marry her. However, he did end up getting Viper to agree to a divorce after leveraging her own life, which he had just both saved from demonic possession and in the process endangered. Viper would end up having Madripoor taken from her by the combined efforts of Tony Stark and Tiger, with the Tiger replacing Viper as the ruling power of Madripoor. Because I don't think Tiger becomes the princess of Madripoor, but you know. Down with the monarchy, I think, is what happens, maybe? Number 5. Power Broker. The Power Broker currently in Marvel Comics is a mysterious figure whose true identity has not yet been revealed. But previous to that, we know Power Broker is Curtis Jackson. However, with the former Power Broker now dead, that's Curtis Jackson, a new unknown character has risen up to seemingly take Jackson's place. And whichever Power Broker we're talking about, the fact remains that they are one of the most powerful crime bosses out there. They are, they have been, and they probably will continue to be. Like Roderick Kingsley's Hobgoblin, who we discussed earlier, the Power Broker is another villain who has mastered the art of turning crime into a business. In the Power Broker's case, they generally grant powers to people after getting them to sign a contract that generally promises, regardless of their alignment, a portion of the profits from said powers will be paid to the broker themselves. As heroes aren't as well known for turning profit, generally the broker's clients tend to end up as mercenaries or criminals. Power Broker also has been affiliated with Power Broker Inc., their own corporation, and the Hench app, which partnered up supervillains with compatible henchmen for when it came to their heists. Number 4. Tiger. Tiger was once Jessen Hohen, and as you know by now, she is a very influential figure, mainly based in Madripoor. She ended up becoming the woman known as Tiger in order to get revenge on crime boss Roche, and following his defeat, she took over his role as major crime lord of Madripoor, or crime lady, I guess. Tiger is so influential that she was part of Prince Baran's close circle back in the day. She took control of Madripoor following the defeat of Viper as Madame Hydra, who temporarily temporarily ruled the island nation. Tiger has lost complete control of the island at times, but is always considered a major key player when it comes to the governance and business of Madripoor. However, she typically is painted as the most moral of the crime lords of Madripoor. While Tiger isn't afraid to get involved in illegal activities, she does try to keep the illegal activities she dips into more clean, and doesn't really get involved in anything that could cause the people of Madripoor a great deal of harm. In other words, she's not known for trading in people or really in hard drugs, and will actively speak out against or even seek to stop crime lords who would. Number 3. Count Nefaria. Count Nefaria isn't just a powerful crime boss either. Like some other bosses out there, he's also managed to get his hands on physical power and powers as well. Count Nefaria is Count Lucino Nefaria, also the father of Madame Mask. He comes from a long line of nobility, which has granted him a fortune, one that he has prided himself in growing and expanding through criminal enterprises, as Nefaria is also a member of the powerful crime organization, the Magia. Nefaria would go on to use his fortune and his pursuit in the area of science and advancement to gain superpowers himself. Shortly after this development, he would die, but then he'd also be brought back, and as a result of that, become even more physically and mentally powerful and durable. So Nefaria is strong in a lot of ways. Number 2. Kingpin. Probably the greatest of all criminal empire masterminds in the Marvel Universe is Kingpin. Wilson Fisk is known for being one of the most powerful, influential, and overall politically conniving and manipulative of all the crime lords out there. The crazy thing about Fisk too is, while his methods can be questionable at times, he is so powerful because he is actually a pretty good leader overall. When he was young, Fisk realized the importance of politics, and became well versed in many different political tactics and political science, believing it to be the most useful skill when it came to gaining and maintaining power. And honestly, it seems like he was right. It's often his wit and his stratagem that make Fisk such a dangerous villain. Despite the fact that he is also insanely strong and physically powerful, it's really his mind and his influence that you need to watch out for. And his intel, he knows a lot of stuff. Number 1. Zhu Wenwu and the Ten Rings. Zhu Wenwu has to be the most powerful crime boss we have seen in the greater Marvel multiverse. That's right, when it comes to Earth 616, I feel like I have to give it up for Kingpin, but when it comes to the MCU, the alternate reality of Earth 199999, I think Zhu Wenwu takes it. Wenwu is the father of Shang-Chi and is an immortal crime boss whose aging was dramatically slowed by the Ten Rings. The Ten Rings are both the artifact that he wields, which grants him great power, but is also the name Wenwu gave to his army, who helped him seize power and maintain his control over the years. Wenwu built such a massive criminal empire in the known world that he began to seek out the unknown, mystical, and mysterious places on Earth, such as Ta Lo, where he ended up meeting his future wife Ying Li in his search for power. His love for Ying Li made him give up his pursuit of power, but after her death, he would soon return to a life of crime and once again continue to seek more power, believing that in giving that up, that was what had made his family vulnerable to attack in the first place. In his place, his daughter Zhu Zaling became the ruler of the Ten Rings and her father's criminal enterprises. Number 10. Created his own crime business monopoly. In issue number 50 of The Amazing Spider-Man, which also coincidentally happens to be Kingpin's first appearance ever, Peter Parker decides to call it quits on being Spider-Man. As soon as Kingpin hears tell of this, he decides to take this opportunity to put his master plan into action. He's been aiming to make the world of crime a business since day one, and now is his golden opportunity. He gets together all the major players, and they all almost unanimously agree to Kingpin taking charge of a new, fully organized and cohesive criminal empire. Well, except for the big man, who actually tries to return to the world of crime after leaving it and take charge of this new organization that Fisk basically just built. Doesn't go so great for him, as you can imagine. Unfortunately, before the end of the issue, Spider-Man has already returned, so this attempt was kinda short-lived, but it wouldn't stop Kingpin from trying to create a vast and efficient criminal empire in the future, all under his own leadership, of course. And at least it lasted for a few issues there. That attempt. Number 9. Attempted to silence the press. After bringing together his crime monopoly, Kingpin began a massive crime spree, which got the notice of the press. The Daily Bugle started to talk about who could be behind behind everything that was going on and decided to cover it because, well, it was news. Kingpin, however, didn't like that they were alerting the public to what was going on or having anyone poke their nose into his affairs. He kidnapped J. Jonah Jameson in response and threatened him to stop reporting on the increase in crime or else. Jameson refused to abide, stating he would not be pressured into having someone tell him what he could or couldn't print in his paper. And fortunately, Spider-Man did end up arriving, and while initially getting beaten, would later save the day. Although that's not quite how Jameson, of course, would remember it. He's like, Spider-Man threatened me. And friends, before we move on to this next spot, if you are enjoying this list and you want more lists on Kingpin because Kingpin is awesome and he deserves to be hyped, be sure to let us know by giving this video a thumbs up. Number 8. Betrayed Don Rigoletto. The original Rigoletto. There is actually another Don Rigoletto who succeeded the original. He too, however, was taken out by Kingpin. Wilson Fisk used to be the bodyguard, enforcer, and kind of general right-hand man to Don Rigoletto initially in the comics. However, getting in good with Don was all part of Wilson's elaborate plot to take control of the city. He had been building connections for years, waiting for this moment when he would take out his boss and replace him. Fisk killed Rigoletto in a moment of vulnerability, near the end of issue number 3 of Daredevil, The Man Without Fear. After a meeting, Don was complaining about the request that he'd had to move into more ludicrous areas of crime. At least, areas of crime he considered to be ludicrous. I think most of us would, actually. Fisk seems to respond by giving Don a temple massage to help ease his boss's stress. However, this doesn't last, as while Don is soothed momentarily and at peace, Fisk then decides to snap his neck. The moment also goes to show just how much Don trusted Wilson. Granted, Don Rigoletto was still a crime boss, but Wilson in a lot of ways was probably a worse replacement when it came to how much power he has managed to amass and how dangerously he wields that power. Number 7. Joined Hydra. Kingpin ended up joining up with Hydra later on, even becoming one of its leaders. Or at least, so he thought. When it was revealed that higher up the chain, the Red Skull was also involved, Kingpin decided to break ties. Evil as he was, even he didn't want to be allied with the Red Skull. However, he still, for a time, was the one seemingly controlling Hydra behind the scenes, with Supreme Hydra, who unknowingly was actually his son, Richard, reporting to him. In fact, Richard had actually infiltrated Hydra while his father was in a permanent state of shock, almost comatose, and had set up everything for his dad to simply come along and take control. Too bad Red Skull was involved though. Kingpin's plan at the time was to overthrow the United States government, and he and Hydra, up until the Red Skull reveal, actually made for a pretty powerful alliance. Number 6. Put Aunt May in the ICU. While this one wasn't intentional, Kingpin did end up being the one responsible for almost killing Aunt May. Notably though, Aunt May seems to have some kind of like immortality powers, at least when it comes to plots and scripts, as she didn't die here, nor has she ever really properly died anytime her life has been threatened or seemingly even snuffed out. Spider-Man had actually been Kingpin's target. This was after Spider-Man had revealed his true identity of Peter Parker to the world. This put a target on Peter's back, obviously, with Kingpin putting a hit on Spider-Man. However, the shooter who was aiming for Peter missed, and instead hit his Aunt May, who was with Peter at the time. Aunt May ended up on death's doorstep and very nearly died here. Meanwhile, Peter donned his black suit and searched for the one responsible. When he found out it was Fisk, he went to pay Kingpin a visit in prison in issue 542 of Amazing Spider-Man. Oh yeah, Kingpin did all of this from a prison cell, by the way. Peter beat him to within an inch of his life as a warning and declared that if May didn't make it, he would be back to finish the job. It was such an evil thing that it even made Spider-Man momentarily pretty evil. Number 5. First Kill. As tragic as Wilson Fisk's origins are, the fact remains that he committed his first murder at a young age. In the 1998 Daredevil series, considered volume 2 overall, in issue number 15, we get a look back on what Wilson Fisk's childhood was like. His parents struggle to make ends meet and are constantly arguing about the finances. Bills unpaid means that things are constantly turning off in the Fisk household. One such thing they end up losing is the heat, which results in Wilson's pet rat, Benjamin Franklin, freezing to death. At least, I think that's a rat. I wasn't sure if it was a rat or a mouse when I was looking at the comic, but I'm pretty sure it's a rat because of the tail. I'm no animal expert though, or rodent expert for that matter. Fisk becomes obsessed with money, and at one point is paid $15 to start a fire. When a maintenance man gets in the way of his plan, he becomes Wilson's first kill. That is how obsessive young Wilson has become at this point, and continues to be pretty much throughout his life. Pretty obsessive guy. Number 4. Killed Crazy Horse. Crazy Horse was the nickname given to Maya Lopez's aka Echo's father. His real name was Willie Lincoln, and he ended up dying because of his connection to Kingpin. Initially, Wilson and Willie Willie were best friends, thick as thieves, and Fisk appreciated Willie's off-the-wall nature. Wilson himself was a bit crazy when it came to his behavior at the time, and having Crazy Horse around helped him to feel, I guess, a little bit more sane by comparison. That is until Crazy Horse got a little too wild even for Wilson. Kingpin ordered Lincoln killed and then raised Maya as his ward. He sent her to all the best schools, seeing potential in her. You can imagine Maya's reaction when years later she realized that Wilson was the one responsible for taking her father from her. She attempted to kill Wilson, shooting him point blank in the head. Fisk would actually surprisingly survive this, though he would be left blind for a time as a result of that attack. I still can't believe that he survived it. Like, that's crazy. Number 3. Brutally kills Anatoly Renskahov. In the Daredevil Netflix series, Anatoly Renskahov is a leader of the Russian mafia in New York. When he fails the Kingpin, unable to get the true name of Daredevil from night nurse Claire Temple, Kingpin decides he wants to have a word with Anatoly. Renskahov comes forward himself, actually wishing to speak with Kingpin and kind of clear the air. But this is not the type of word Kingpin had in mind. Instead, Fisk begins to attack Renskahov, and despite Renskahov's own toughness, the man survived life in Russian prison after all, Fisk kills him using a car door to crush his head. The crazy part is throughout the scene we learn it is not Renskahov's failure that has actually ignited Fisk's rage here, but the fact that he embarrassed Wilson in front of Vanessa while the two were on a date. This just goes to show how dangerous it is to upset Kingpin, as he has generally been shown as having a very violent streak and a sometimes off-the-wall temper. To relive this moment, you can return to the shocking end of episode 4 of season 1. The Daredevil series, at least in Canada by the way, is still on Netflix and available to stream. I was watching it earlier. It's great. Number 2. Killed Spider-Man. Sometimes people forget the Kingpin isn't just a Daredevil villain, he's a prominent Spider-Man villain as well. In fact, his first appearance wasn't in Daredevil, it was actually in an issue of Amazing Spider-Man, issue number 50 to be exact, which we actually talked about at the beginning of this list. So it didn't come as a surprise when he showed up as the main villain in the Spider-Man animated film Into the Spider-Verse, at least for fans that know this about him, I guess. What did come as a surprise though was that he actually succeeded in killing Spider-Man, aka Peter Parker, in the movie. Fortunately, at the same time, Spider-Man, aka Miles Morales, was just discovering his own spider powers, and had a multiversal team of spider folks end up joining him in order to stop Wilson Fisk's evil plot. Still, Kingpin did kill Peter Parker in cold blood, and then also tried to play it like he'd always thought of Spider-Man as a great hero and was friends with the guy, even throwing a banquet in Spider-Man's honor afterward and inviting love of his life, Mary Jane Watson, to it. Wow. Number 1. Completely ruined Daredevil's life. During the Born Again story arc, Daredevil's true identity as Matt Murdock ends up being used against him. Kingpin ends up acquiring this information, which was sold by Karen Page for drugs in Mexico, but finds its way to him in New York. Kingpin then attempts to ruin Matt Murdock and thereby Daredevil's life in every conceivable way. His house ends up being firebombed, and even his uniform is left in tatters. His accounts are frozen by the IRS. Fisk even tries to ruin his reputation as a lawyer by getting a police lieutenant to swear that he saw Murdock bribe a witness to commit an act of perjury while on the stand. Not only that, but he also threatens the life of Karen Page as well, almost killing her.